This is a follow-up video to our SAP security upgrade from ECC system to S4HANA system video that we posted a couple of weeks ago. So what we will try to do in this video here is to go through a simulation of some of the steps that we learned about in the upgrade video. So what I have done for this video is I created 3 roles in the ECC system and downloaded them to be uploaded into S4HANA system. Okay. So the 3 roles that I created as S4HANA 1, X colon S4HANA 2 and X colon S4HANA 3. And these 3 roles have transaction codes that simulate different changes in the S4HANA system. Okay. So for example, we have S4HANA 1 role that has some transaction codes that have whose functionalities have been merged into some other transaction code, or they have been made obsolete. Okay, they don't work. Some of these, couple of them won't work. Okay. Now, the second role that we have in this case is, some, if you see, there are, these transaction codes are technical transaction codes, right? So with this list, we will try to figure out, what kind of authorization level changes, meaning authorization objects or authorization value changes are coming into S4HANA for these transaction codes as example. And the third role that we have is S4HANA 3. This role has transaction codes that have been blacklisted in S4HANA. So when I say these transaction codes have been blacklisted, what that means is that these transaction codes will not work in S4HANA anymore, which means, some of these transaction codes could be redirected to some other transaction code. In some cases, you may get an ABAP dump. And in some cases, you may get an outright message saying that, you cannot use this transaction code anymore. Okay, so that's what I mean by blacklisted transaction codes. Now, before we proceed further and take a look at and upload these roles into S4HANA and go through some steps that we saw in the earlier video, I would like to suggest that before the system is upgraded from ECC to S4HANA, I would strongly recommend that you take a backup of the roles. Either you download the roles that you have or create a transport for the roles and then import that transport into some safe system for future reference, just in case if something is not, if you feel something is not right with the upgrade. Along with that, I would recommend that you download and the security related data from the tables, right? Like for example, tables like AGR underscore T codes, AGR underscore 1250, AGR underscore 1251, USOBT, USOBX, and the underscore C tables, right? USOBX underscore C, USOBT underscore C tables. Okay, so just as a backup, right? And this data download should be done from the ECC system before the upgrade begins. Now, what we have done in this case is we have downloaded the roles that you see here from ECC system, and we will now go and upload this roles into S4HANA, and then as part of the pre-upgrade, meaning before you go to and execute the SU25 steps, we will look at a couple of tables to see what kind of impact this upgrade is going to bring into your environment, right? When impact is, the impact it's going to have on your roles. Okay. Now I have compiled, the list and this list of transaction code in one column here, and assume that, think that this is your AGR underscore AGR underscore T codes list. Okay. So let us first go and upload those three roles into your S4HANA system, right? So go to transaction code PFCG and then upload the roles. And once you upload the roles, and we are going to generate the roles. Now, again, keep in mind that this is only a simulation. So you assume that this S4HANA system that we are looking at is a upgraded system. Okay, so we are actually on this S4HANA system is 1809. Okay, with support pack, feature pack 02. Okay, now let's go and upload the remaining two roles and we'll generate those two roles also. In the role 2, which is the technical role, in ECC system, I did not add one transaction code. Okay, so let's do that. I did not include, if you see here, you don't see SM01 here. Okay, so I'm going to add that into this role here. Let's generate this role also. Let's go and upload the third role. All right. Now that we have uploaded the three roles, now let us go and take a look at a couple of tables. Okay, so these tables will give you in general basic idea about what impact the upgrade is going to have on your roles. Okay, but from a functional standpoint, you could also, before even the upgrade is taken up, one of the good thing, best practices I would say is for you and the entire project team is in the functional team is to go through the simplification list document that SAP provides with every SAP S4HANA release, right? So the simplification list document basically describes all the changes that are coming in with that particular release. So that is one document that you should, go through even before the upgrade is started. Okay. Now, after the system is upgraded, from a security standpoint, there are a couple of things you could do. Okay. So, for example, you can go and take a look at the table called PRGN underscore CORR2. Okay. And then you take a line out, in this table, you input the list of transaction codes that are part of your ADR underscore T codes list. Okay. Take that list from ADR underscore T codes that you downloaded from ECC system. And in the first column, right, the first field. Okay, so before we go to that, let's go to S11 and see what those two fields are because the descriptions for those two fields are the same, right? So both are called transaction codes, right? That's the label. But if you look at the field name, right, it's S underscore T code and S and T underscore T code. Now, this table contains the list of transaction codes, list of old transaction codes and new transaction codes for a particular release. So in this table, when you input the transaction codes list from your ADR underscore T codes, right, ECC ADR underscore T codes, in the S underscore T code field. Okay, so let's copy that. And in this field, you input the transaction codes from your ADR underscore T codes, right? And do this, and let's say give your release and execute it. So what it's going to do here is for that particular release, right, it is going to tell you which of the transaction codes, the old transaction codes that are coming in from ECC are going to be replaced in with which transaction codes in S4HANA. Okay, so all these transaction codes that you see here are going to be the functionality of these transaction codes are merged into the transaction code BP, which means any roles that you have with these transaction codes, right? Those needs to be adapted to be, to have the BP transaction code in it, and accordingly you'll have to also adjust the authorization objects and authorizations in the authorization objects. Okay, so this is an impact you have. So before you go to SU25, right, when this is, you can download this list and discuss with your subject matter experts and business process owners and tell them that, all these transaction codes are going to be, functionality from these transaction codes are going to be merged into the transaction code BP, and how do they want to handle it. Okay, so you may have to do some, role adjustments depending on your process, business needs. So this is one table that you can take a look, download the list, and discuss that the list with your functional people. Okay. Now another table that you could also take a look at is ABLM underscore blacklist. Okay. Now this table contains, like you see, if you see the word here, blacklist, right? This will contain the list of programs, transaction codes and tables. So, okay, this is a GUI problem, but this list will contain the list of programs, function modules, transaction codes that have been blacklisted in this particular release. Okay, so let's say you go here and then let's input the same set of transaction codes. Okay. And let's execute it. And if you see here, these are some of the transaction codes that have been blacklisted, right? So you have the same list here. Okay. Now, what you could do is you can take this list and go to your functional team and say, these are the transaction codes that cannot be used anymore. Right. How? Let's check let's test some of these transaction codes. Okay. What they do when you execute them in S4HANA. Okay. So let's go and execute, let's say, VA05N. Okay. So some of these transaction codes will give, these transaction codes will give you different messages, right? And in this case, VA05N is now going to be redirected to VA05. Okay, so that is one message. So what you should be doing here is, right, in this case, you need to observe some of these columns here. Okay, these 3 columns mainly. No, not 3, 4 columns. Let's execute VA06 and see what happens. Now this says it's no longer supported. Okay, which means this has been made obsolete. And if you look at the list, the VA06 is also here. Okay, now let's take a look at VA25N. Okay, and again it says VA25N is redirected to VA25. Okay, now let's see, let's take VA94. Okay, let's see what happens with VA94 and look at this entries here. Okay, so this one gives you a dump. Okay, so there is an OSS note. I don't remember the OSS note, but what it basically tells you is that OSS note that when there is a dump like this, you can go and contact SAP, and they will guide you how to enable this transaction code. Okay. Now there is a program for that also. They will ask you to run some. There's a program that you need to use to do that. So in case of VA95, if you look, it clearly says VA95 cannot be executed, which means VA95 is gone in S4HANA. Okay, and look at the entries here. So you'll have to, experiment and understand what these entries mean. Based on that, you get the messages. So we saw the dump, right? Again, it says VM4 does not exist, cannot be executed. So anything with R and X cannot be executed. Anything with a D is basically ABAP dump. You get an ABAP dump, and then something that is blank in all these 3-4 columns. Those are redirected to, in most cases, redirected to some other transaction code. Okay, so this is another list that you should be downloading and give that list to the functional team to tell them that some of these transaction codes are no longer valid in our environment, and some of these transaction codes are going to be redirected to some other transaction code. So the reason you need to do these things is because the end users needs to be trained, right? So that part has to be included in your project plan and your upgrade steps, right? Okay, so you download these two tables, right? Another thing that you could do before you do anything in SU25, you can also run, instead of executing step 2D in SU25, what you could do is you could also execute a program called prof gen underscore cor underscore report underscore 2. Okay, you can execute this report, and this is basically your step 2D of SU25. Okay, now let's go and put these 3 roles there. And see what happens, okay? And go and execute it. Now this is basically, again, your step 2D, right? And it basically tells you what are all the transaction codes, how the rules are going to get impacted, okay? So if you see here in this case, all the roles, the transaction code from this S4HANA 1 role, okay, is going to be replaced with BP, transaction code BP. So before you do anything in SU25, you can download this list okay, as a spreadsheet or whichever format you want, and then share it with your subject matter experts and BPO, business process owners, and to see, check with them how they would like to um, handle this, right? So if they say, you need to, it's okay to replace the transaction code, you can just say automatically adjust the menu by selecting each of the rows. Or you could maybe, if they say, let's keep them, see what happens is, right, if you execute, let's say, xk01, okay, it will take you to transaction code BP. Okay, so if you see, this is your xk01 screen, now redirecting the transaction code to BP as xk01 is obsolete. So your business team, the functional teams basically don't have a choice here, to really speaking, right? Uh, they will have to adjust, replace xk01 or all these transaction codes for with BP. Okay. Now, in some cases, you'll also find that, the roles, that some of the transaction codes it will say it does not exist, meaning those transaction codes have been removed from the system altogether. Okay, they're not obsolete, they have been removed. Okay, now SM's type transaction codes like SM01, right? When you see that transaction code here in this whole transaction code list, and if it, you will find it under the lock checkbox will be checked for that, which means the transaction code has been locked. You cannot use it by default. And in some cases, you'll also see the transaction codes have been. You'll find some transaction codes as obsolete. Okay, so which means you cannot use those transaction codes anymore. Okay, so this is another report, one report that you could download and then talk to your business process owners to see how they want you to handle the changes to the roles. Okay. Now another thing that you could do is I would say to see go to SA24 and see what kind of changes from an authorization object level S4HANA environment system is going to bring in. Okay, so for example, let's take SE38 for example. Okay. Now, when you take a look at SE38, I would suggest that you'd look for any object that do not look familiar to you. Okay. So, for example, if you look here, S underscore program NAM, right? Prognam is something that I see is unfamiliar to us, right? When we talk in terms, about SA38 or SE38. So this is something that is new. Okay. Now, similarly, if you, let's go and see if you find, so you should, take a look of with some transaction codes that you familiar, that you frequently use, and see if you see any unfamiliar objects that show up in SO24. Okay. Now, if you look at, let's say, SCC4, for example, right? One of the things that you would see here is, if you look at the objects list, earlier you would see as taboo des as a Y in a yes, because when you put SCC4 in a role, this object would automatically come in with this 0203 or with the authorization group SS. But now if you see the central taboo disp is no longer there, it's not going to come in by default. but instead it is going to bring in tabu naam with the client table name, right? T000. So there are some authorization level changes that are coming in, correct? In this case. Similarly, again, you can see if you find any unfamiliar objects here, in this case also. Uh, Another example that we can take a look at is SM37, for example, in this case. Okay, so let's go to SM37. And again, you will see one of the objects that I found unfamiliar was batch NA1, BTCH NA1. Okay. So these are familiar to us, right? Batch ADM, batch job, and batch NAM. But batch NA1 is something that I was not familiar with, right? So one of the things that you could do, right? You can download this table from S4HANA. You already have downloaded USOBT and USOBX tables from ECC. And then, you can do the same for S4HANA and then do a VLOOKUP kind of a thing to see what changes are coming in, right? In S4HANA. Just a thought. So the point here is, it's a good idea for you to, understand what objects are coming in, of new objects and authorization values are coming in after the upgrade. Okay, and this is also, my learning the way I learn is I do this whenever I get a new system. I go and do some of this activity, right? I come to SU24 and check if there are any changes like that. Okay, I think it's a good practice to do it. Now, before you upgrade the system, right? One of the steps that you have to do before you go to SU25 is execute a report called in S4HANA, execute a report called SU24 underscore auto underscore repair. Okay. So what this report does is it basically repairs any inconsistencies that you may have, your system may have with respect to SU24 data. Okay, so SAP recommends that you execute this report with all the options selected before you do anything in SU25. Okay, this is one of the again I would say the first step in upgrading your roles. Okay, so you run this program with all the options selected, and there is this note here that you should read before you use this program. Okay, the note number is here. So this will take some time, right? So let's let it execute, and then we'll see the output of this role, of this program, and see how it looks. So after this, we will go through step 2D and 2C in SU25. Okay, so if you see here, you can see that, you get the data here, right? So ob-level field values, all of this. So if there is any inconsistency in anywhere, it will basically give you that list. Okay, it will repair the list and show you. Okay, so if you don't do the step before you start SU25, what SAP says is you should be doing that then before you execute step 2C in SU25. Okay, because in step 2C, you are basically adjusting your authorizations in the roles. Okay, so you either execute this report before you start SU25 steps, or before you start step 2C in SU25. Okay, so once this is done, this is the first step in your upgrade process, technical upgrade for roles. Then you go to SU25. Okay, and we saw 2D, right, through that report. So if you go and do this and say X colon S4HANA star, right? We saw this report, that other saw the screen earlier. So execute this and then you will see the changes that are coming in, right? Now if you see here, S4HANA, if you see the transaction codes are getting replaced, entry will be replaced with BP, all these transaction codes. And now in this case, if you see the blacklisted role, right, the transaction codes that are blacklisted in S4HANA 3, you will see here, old entry is deleted, will be deleted message. And then if you see here, the obsolete checkbox is checked, which means these two transaction codes can no longer be used. Okay. So you download this list and like I said earlier, you download this list and talk to your functional experts to tell them this is what is going to happen in the roles and how do you want, how do they want you to handle them? Okay, adjust the roles. Now, they don't, like I said earlier, right? For most cases, they don't have a choice. Okay, they will have to replace if they want to use that particular functionality. Okay. Now, in this case, if they want to keep it, that's fine. You don't need to touch this role, but then again, when the users execute this transaction code, it's not going to work, right? So there is some lot of discussion that needs to happen before you complete your upgrade. Okay. So don't assume anything on your own because these are very important. Some major changes that may happen in your system because of this, this list. So it is always a good idea to talk to your functional experts before you actually um, make the changes in the role. So after this thing, after 2 days done, the next step that you could do is in S4HANA is and the upgrade is to C. Okay. Now I'm not going through 2A, 2B because this is not directly impacting the roles. I know that's not the purpose of this video, but these two will adjust your SU24 data basically, right? Steps to be, you'll have to accept the proposals for SU24 data that S4HANA brings in. Okay, so let's go to step 2C and see what happens here. Now, if you want to, adjust your roles, you can filter these roles or, whatever you want to do. Go, for example, whatever, if you have your roles list, okay, you can go and make the changes in PFCG directly, okay? But if you do that, you'll have to do it in the expert mode, okay? So what you could do is you can select the roles, some things, the role that you want to, you have to adjust. In this case, the authorization is already merged because it's like I said, right? It's a straight install system, right? It's not an upgraded system. So what you would normally do is you select the roles and you go to merge mode. This is simulation mode. And the simulation mode is going to tell you what are the authorization changes that are going to come in. It will basically here it will tell you the old status, that is the authorization that are already existing in the role. And then you will also have new, okay, which means those authorizations are coming in because of upgrade. Okay, in this case, for example, if you see here, you have new here, right? So in this case, this set of authorizations is coming in S4HANA, and this set of authorizations is going away. right? So this is a simulation. So you might want to, as well download this report also before you actually make the change in the role. Okay. Now, once you have decided to make the changes into the role, then what you do is you go to PFCG and then you go and make the changes in the export mode. Okay. And here you select read old status and merge with new data. Now there is an SAP note 113290, okay, that basically talks about that merge process, how to use that merge functionality. Okay, so these are some of the things that you need to do and keep in mind after you have upgraded your ECC system to your S4HANA system. Okay, so this is kind of a demo for our earlier video on the topic. All right.